Alrighty, so in this video I'm gonna go to the bathhouse. Had to start a new file, so I can't use the work there. And I think, oh my god, is that not God mode? Do I not have God? Okay, I do. I think this is gonna take a full video, or it's definitely gonna take a full video. I have a lot to talk about over here. So yeah, to go to the bathhouse. So last time I was here, I went down here, and it takes you to what I call the bouncy block stage. But if you go up instead, which is a much harder route, it takes you to the bathhouse. And the idea, or like a general idea I've had, is that the harder some stage is to reach, or the harder some stage is, the harder it should be to reach. And I somewhat stuck with that, I think, but not entirely. And I think reaching Bathhouse is possibly a little harder than warranted. I don't think the area in itself is all that hard. That being said, I very much still like where it's positioned. I like that you have to sort of struggle to get there. And yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about what I like about that when I get there. First I want to say something about this room. So I remember making this room, and it was definitely late in development, because for a long time this room used to be just a bunch of platforms under blocks that you had to bonk your way up to the ceiling with to hit a gravity arrow, and then you like sort of bonk your way down again. Did like a little thing there, and that was pretty terrible. And Zero especially hated that room, so I knew I had to change it. But this was during a period where I had very little motivation to work on the game, and I didn't work on it for very long. And during that time I sort of felt like my doubt about the game was growing. I started questioning whether like it was even worthwhile continuing to put effort into it, or if I should just try to just finish it and release it. And I think that's like very relatable for people that if you worked on something for a long time, and this goes not just for fan games but for really any big project, that you're gonna reach periods where you start doubting yourself, and you become blind to whatever it is you're making. So I was definitely in a place like that when I made this screen. And the reason I remember that so well is because I remember the feeling I had after finishing this screen. Because it was just so reassuring. Like I felt like I'd made a really good screen. And it sort of reminded me, I guess, of my own competency or whatever. And then I think it just put me in a better mindset, and put me in a put the rest of the game in a better light for me. So I knew that if I can make something this good, then I probably can make other things that are also good. So yeah, as you can tell from that, I'm quite pleased with this screen. It's simple, like you sort of do the same jump 5 times in a row. If we want to be really reductive about it, but it just has a very distinct character, and I think it's memorable. But yeah, anyways, so do that, and then you get to this little tower here, which is leading to the bathhouse. And so, as always, when I start making something, I need to have an idea. I don't want to sit down and just doodle in GameMaker and see if I come up with something. Like, I want to have at least some plan. and sometimes the plan can be kind of vague. It can be like, oh, I want to make a screen with, well, for this part it was, oh, I just want to make something that has vines and platforms. Because I used to make so much stuff like that, like in the CN2 era of my making. So making CN2 and like the games that I made right after it, I made so much stuff that had like platforms and water and vines in various combinations. And then when I started making this game, I was definitely like past that and more into other gimmicks. But then at some point I just got motivated, like, oh, I should revisit those kinds of ideas and try to make something like that again. So that was the idea that I had going into making this tower. And yeah, it sort of starts out like that. Like I guess this is me building up towards something. So I start with just introducing vines, and then there's like a little bit of water and a little bit of platform. And then when I got around here, I think, so I don't remember exactly, but I probably got really bored already. Like I just didn't want to work with that stuff anymore. I've been there. I've done that. So I started using gravity arrows, and then I came up with this, which I think. So I guess this is a way to sort of try to like force, or I think I really exerted myself to find some use of vines that felt novel. And yeah, I came up with these little shoots. So this seems to me like something I haven't really seen before. And this is like you can play it fast. Let's see if I can get like a good. Yeah, okay. So it feels kind of good if you manage to pull that off. But that takes a little practice to learn, and it's kind of awkward to work with at first. But I think it's a decently cool idea. Okay. Upwards wall hug thing. But then I guess I got bored with the vines. Then this came out. But so the design here is not that interesting. But something that I think the save is a good illustration of, and something that I really like about this game that I think I definitely nailed, and that I also think is. I'm not sure if it's overlooked, but it's definitely not talked about enough, I think, like in discussions about the game. So much of the discussion surrounding CN3 is about the gimmicks, and that seems to be like the defining feature in people's minds, is that it's just a gimmick needle game. And to some people that maybe like this is the game that started sort of a new wave of needle games. But for me, this is like a very distinct feature of the game, and definitely like one of the qualities that I think sets it apart from a lot of other games. Something that I'm very proud of, and that would be the room layouts and just the way the screens look. So I think a screen like this has, I mean, if you just look at it, it barely looks playable. This is something I keep coming back to, but I love screens like this where they don't really look like a needle screen. They just look like some kind of tile set artwork almost. And if you can make a screen that looks like that, but that is also like functional and potentially even fun to play, I think that's like a really, it's a hard thing to do, but it gives a lot if you manage to do that. And that's something that I think I succeeded very well with this screen. So for one thing, just having like so many screens that just don't look like any other screens in the game. that have their own identity. But also to have that, but also have them be fully functional. Like this screen is another example. Very distinct way it looks, and it's still a fun screen to play, in my opinion. This is also like distinct, although it's not the most fun screen. But yeah, it's something that I definitely worked hard on, just making stuff that looks different. And I might continue to point that out later, because I think Bathhouse is like chock full of screens like that. Just a very interesting appearances. And yeah, so talk about something completely else that I want to mention with this save. It's like almost one of my favorite screens in the game, or saves rather. And I think this, okay, whatever, not in the needle zone, although I want to be. Okay, whatever. I think that this illustrates a sort of needle design philosophy, or it can be used to illustrate a needle design philosophy that I subscribe to making this. So back when CN1 came out, so CN1 had a floor 78, which is a notorious floor. Like, it's extremely difficult, much harder than the majority of what comes after it. And to some people, it's the hardest screen in the game. And I remember, so CN1 came out, and Hiddo played it, and he critiqued floor 78, and he told me, like, the reason he doesn't like this, it's because it's difficult in the wrong way. So to him, so he made a distinction between something being difficult because it's technically difficult or because it's just precise. And like floor 78 was definitely precise. It's just a series of jumps that needs a very specific set of inputs. Whereas like a technical difficult jump would be something like this. Which has much looser timing to the jumps, but it still requires like a lot of kind of quick inputs and a lot of control and understanding of the gimmicks. And I think so. When I made CN1, like I'd never really made a fan game before, and I'd maybe played like, I don't know, like 20 fan games myself. So I didn't really have a good grasp of what makes a good needle game, and I don't think anyone else did at the time either. Like, people made just a whole lot of junk. Like, even at the time, it was kind of junk. So I never thought of that kind of design philosophy. Like, I'd always try to just make stuff that seemed like it hadn't been done before. Because the way I looked at needle then was just like, oh, everyone's making corridor needle and using generic jumps, and I want to get away from that and try to make something unique. But of course then, like, if you only try to make something that looks unique, it's probably, like, it's very easy making a jump you haven't seen before, but it's very hard making a jump you haven't seen before. That also is fun to play. And I was definitely like missing that second part, at least by today's standards. So that was sort of an awakening for me, hearing that Hiddo distinction, and I've carried that with me for every game I made since. Like, I always think in those terms, like, oh, the two ways something can be difficult. And for CN2, so CN2 was definitely like a step in sort of the more technical direction. But for some reason, my design philosophy then was that it's important to have both. So I wanted to have breaks. So I would have like segments where you do a bunch of like vine jumping and platform weaving and stuff like that. But then I would throw in like a random diamond or some shit, just to try to find some kind of balance. And it would have like, it has so many screens, CN2 this is, that are just like have one jump saves, or that have just like just short saves with a bunch of precision jumps. Like way, I don't know. I don't understand it. Like I look back at CN2 fondly, but I don't understand what my vision was for that. Because like I could for sure, like there are screens in that game that I think hold up very well to this day. It's like I had it in me to make that kind of stuff, but I had like a different vision for what I wanted the game to be. I guess, I mean, it added variety, but I don't know, there's just too many like corners and stuff like that. But yeah, anyways, so CN3 I think is like sort of the final step in the other direction, because this game has almost no precise jumps at all. I think you could like almost count on one hand the number of jumps that are hard because the input is strict. And I went here because this is maybe one of them. This is like a corner, but even then, this is like a surprisingly intuitive jump. I have God mode on, by the way, so I don't know if I actually made it. But I think that one way where this game is sort of the culmination of my previous design, where I like finally went all out in the direction that I truly think is the best way, or the way that I like the most, making Needle the most. Yeah, not that much else to say here. I think this is probably the first time that I started using gravity flippers as sort of jump refreshers. So there's like a lot of these. You hit one and then you immediately have to jump. And then I started using that more after this, because it's a surprising, like, it's just a satisfying maneuver. I definitely don't use a lot of just regular upside down platforming in this game. I think I've sort of moved past that. Used to like it in Rukido's games, but okay, so I'm gonna head into the bathhouse now. How long have I been recording? Okay, 18 minutes. That's not too bad. It's a lot of time to spend talking about just 3 screens or 4 screens. Okay, I'm even surprising myself at how much there is to even talk about, but I find a lot of this stuff interesting. Like I spend a lot of time talking with other people who make fan games about various design philosophies and like the experience of making games, and how they look at design and so on. And I find so many commonalities. I find that most people like really share the same ideas of what makes a game good, or at least like most people I talk with. So I think there are like a certain set of rules that you can try to follow when making stuff that are gonna make your games appealing to like a large set of people. Definitely not everyone, but yeah. All right. Okay, so I mentioned before that I really like just the feeling of entering this stage. And I think I've said that about another stage also, in the bouncy block stage. The transition between the first and the second half. That stage. I should. Sorry, I'm gonna go get some water. My throat is kind of dry. Okay. Kind of weird doing this single take edit, non-edited recordings, but whatever. So what I try to emulate here is really the feeling of walking into a real-life bathhouse. That's something that I'm very fond of. So there's a very distinct feeling when you enter a bathhouse, and it's humid in there, and it smells of chlorine, and there's like a certain acoustic, and there's just like a certain calm, I guess, which comes when you're around water, especially like an empty bathhouse at night. It's like a very pretty place to be. So that's sort of what I try to emulate here, and I'm not sure the the visuals really sort of communicate that, but it's mostly the song that I wanted to sound like that. I want to capture that warmth of a bathhouse, and because of that, because I had like a very clear idea of what I wanted this song to sound like, I searched so hard to find the song that sounded like that. So I honestly I must have scoured through like over 50 ambient records to find this song. Like I skimmed through a lot of stuff, but I finding this song I'd say took between like 10 and 15 hours of work. And in the end, I'm not fully satisfied. I like the song in itself a lot, but it's not doesn't quite capture that super specific feeling that I wanted it to. But you know, maybe that song only exists in my head. Who knows? But yeah, that's one thing I like about entering here. Another thing I like about entering here is that there's so much going on like right away, and it feels like you're really entering a new world, and like a really just like a quite stark contrast between the area you were in before and this one. Just look at this, and there's like things going on all over the place, and I quite like that. Oh yes, so I kind of want to talk about how this stage came about. This was like in some regards this was a very hard stage to make, and in others it was a very easy stage to make. So the hard part about it was starting to work on it. So I think this was maybe the ninth stage I made out of 12. And at that point, I was struggling to come up with concepts for stages. Because like I said before, I always need to have like a solid idea before I can work on anything. And I was very keen on having each stage in this game be like very distinct from all the other stages. So it just wouldn't cut it to have a stage that like sort of feels distinct but not quite. So of course then one of the ideas that I had was that I'm gonna make a water stage. But the thing about water stages is that typically they're not fun at all. And especially like, and this doesn't only go for fan games, like this goes in general. Like, name me a Mario game where the worst stage wasn't a water stage. Like, it's just it always is. Like Super Mario 64, it was the fucking the submarine stage. Dire Docks. I don't know, the underwater stages in like Super Mario World are always extremely boring. Same in all 2D Mario games. And yeah, in fan games, like Underwater Needle is just very boring. I never do that anymore. Like full screen submerged by water, it just, that's as boring as it gets. But I still thought that there might be ideas or things that you can do with water that haven't been done yet, that could make for an interesting stage. But then I also thought that in addition to that, I want a stage that sort of looks interesting. For that, I decided to use the mini blocks, which I hadn't used before that. And I also wanted it to sort of do like a loop around. So I don't know, I just had like a bunch of things that I wanted the stage to have. And I also like remember thinking that like to justify having a water stage in the first place, like I really need to knock it out of the park with the ideas that I come up with. Like it's just not good enough to have like the kind of water jumps I had in CM2, where it's just water on top of a spike and you have to like grab the edge of the water. So I had these ideas for how I wanted the stage to be, but the problem is that when you have like a lot of ideas for something and you have very high standards for what you want to make, you're gonna suffer from anxiety when you have to work on it, because you have a lot to live up to. And I had like a big mental block about starting with this stage. Just it felt very daunting trying to like I said, like I wanted to like really justify having a water stage. It had to be really good. So I probably spent like 1 or 2 weeks just not working on the game and like just feeling anxious about it, and I don't know, just second guessing myself. But then what made me start working on it was that I hatched a couple ideas for jumps. So one of the ideas that I had in my head was this idea here on the left. So like a water climb where you had to dodge apples from below. So I had that idea and I thought, oh, okay, whatever, I'll just put it in here somewhere. So I had like these empty 9 screens right here. This is 3x3, like an empty canvas, and I said, oh, okay, whatever, I'll put it in somewhere. So I put it here, top left. And then I had another idea, which was, oh, fucking fuck. What the fuck am I? Okay, sorry. Which was this idea. So those are 2 ideas that I just had like in my head. So then I put this in the bottom right. And then I think I had, oh yeah, I definitely had the spinning wheel idea, which is like an inverted version of a screen I had in Thank the New Geezer. So then I put this one in the bottom left. And once I had these 3 sort of, I guess like solid spots, it was all a matter of like just tying those 3 together, like making a path that goes from one to the next to the next. So that's how I started, and I think stuff like that, just like if you just put something on a screen, it's just an excellent way to get over having a writer's block or anxiety. You just have to start somewhere. But yeah, that was really hard for me to get going. But like I also said, this was one of the easiest stages to make, because once I'd finally done that, I just started like getting lots and lots of ideas, and then I basically got into just flow. Like I felt like the stage just made itself, and I felt like every idea I had worked. And it just I could do no wrong. That's what it felt like. So everything I did was worthwhile, and I felt like I didn't have to redo anything, didn't have to like revise stuff. I could just like work, and I didn't have to stop and think about it. It's such a satisfying feeling. I hope like others can relate to that. The feeling of having flow. And yeah, so one of the ideas that I came up with was this idea, which is it's a water, but you can't jump in it, so, or it doesn't like normal water, you know, it refreshes one of your jumps. So I made this screen. Looked a little different at the time. And I thought, like, oh fuck, like this is a good gimmick. God damn, I could use this a lot. And I'm not even joking right now. Like, it wasn't until a while after I finished making the screen that I realized that I had invented, or thought I'd invented, catharsis water. I genuinely thought I'd come up with a new idea for this for this water. That kind of bummed me out when I realized, but it's also pretty funny. And catharsis water had been like severely underutilized up to this game, I'd say. I know some people have used it, like Inferno has done some cool stuff with it. Like it's been used, but to me, catharsis water should be like as natural as having platform jumps or stuff like that, because the gimmick is just excellent for combining with other things and tying segments together. Yeah, another thing I want to mention here that I really like about this stage, so I haven't said this before, but this is definitely, or I don't know, but definitely, but it's my favorite stage in the game. And part of that is because the process of making it was so satisfying. I went from just having like this frustrating empty canvas, 9 empty screens, and just major anxiety about working on it, to like the screens just filling themselves in almost, being some of the best needle I'd made up to that point. But another reason that I really like this stage, which goes back to what I said on the climb up to the bathhouse, is that the screens just look so nice. They have such a distinct character to them. Like every screen here is like a little painting, just like little things going on here, little quirks, and there's like something about the composition. I don't know. It's like very hard to analyze why something looks good to you, but these screens like are so pleasing for me to look at, and they all look different. Like they're just like little paintings. So I like to think of them like they're 9 little motifs. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe a lot of people can't sort of relate to that sort of needle nerdhood. But to me, that stuff matters so much. That's what makes a needle game stick in my mind. Let's see if there's something else to talk about here. I don't think so. Just this stage that I really like a lot. I want to address the secret here. So some people thought that this secret does not have a proper tell, so it's not clearly indicated enough that there would be a secret here. And basically, I mean, so I think I've talked about this before, but whether something is a tell or not is not really inherent to the thing. It's about what your expectations are. But what I can say about this is, like, this is the one secret that Zero told me was not hidden well enough. He thought this was like the most obvious secret. So yeah, that, I don't know. Like, what should I do? It's just a silly, useless criticism. And I don't know. It's like the screen has 2 exits. Like, maybe you should try the other exit. Maybe that's the secret. Okay. It is the Courage secret. So, which I think is pretty obvious. I started out. The idea for this is based on one of the saves leading up to the bathhouse. It's in the climb up, where you had similar, like, mini gravity flips and a lot of wall hugs. And I liked how that played. So I thought, oh, I could just make a screen that develops that concept. And this is what came out. So what I think is, like, very exceptional about this screen is that it just doesn't play like anything else. At least to me, it doesn't feel that way. And in general with Needle, there's only so much you can do. Like, the kid's moveset is limited. Like, you can move right, you can move left, and you can jump. And then you can add, like, a bunch of gimmicks on top of that to sort of diversify the kinds of movements that you want to make the player go through. But in general, like, yeah, there's good and bad Needle, but it's very, very, very rare that you play something that really feels like you haven't played it before in some way, right? But that's what I think this screen is not. I genuinely feel like the way this plays. I have Godmode on, don't I? Oh yeah, for sure. For a second there, I thought, okay, where am I going? Well, I hit like 50 spikes on the way. Okay, still didn't make it. The way the screen plays is just feels different from other stuff, and I think, like, throughout my needle making career, and maybe, like, at most I've made a handful of screens that would fit that description. And the only other one that I can really think of off the top of my head is the spinning water apple screen in Thank the New Geezer. Like, that to me is like a also doesn't play like anything else that I played. And the fact that I managed to come up with something like that using only base gimmicks, like I only use gravity flippers and blocks and spikes, along with the fact that this is like one of the most fun screens in the entire game. Like, this is super fun to play through. For me it is, of course, so I need to qualify that. I'm just so proud of that. I love this screen. I also love it visually, how it looks sort of like an equalizer. Got these bars going up and down. Like, again, a super distinct looking screen. Like, if you play this and you see this screen, like, you're gonna remember exactly where it's from. So yeah, I think that's a fair thing for me to talk about. Just some of the things that I really like about this game, and this secret, and the fact that I could make something like this is one of those things. But yeah, that should sort of wrap it up. One of my favorite secrets, my favorite stage. I love having favorites of things. I always make lists and like rank stuff in my head, even when it's, you know, my own children, like this game, with the stages in this game. All right. So it might be a little interesting. The inspiration for this this last sequence here, where you float down and the water gets just murkier until you just disappear. So the inspiration for this was actually a part in and again, my favorite video game of all time, which is The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. So in the Great Bay, there's this little there's this, I don't want to spam. There's this portion of the game, this little fuck do you call it? There's like a location there in the Great Bay called the eel-infested waters, which is like one of the most uncomfortable names that I've ever heard. I think this might be like an actual phobia that I have, just murky water, and like deep murky water where you don't know what's below you in the depths. And that part, like that's one of the most frightening parts of any game. And like Majora's Mask is certainly not a horror game, but I can think of very few things that scare me more. And just like thinking of that, about that portion of the game, makes me uncomfortable. And then you go through these, like really murky, misty waters. There's like strong currents. Then you go down like a big hole, and there are these enormous eels down there. But yeah, that was, anyways, that was the inspiration. And I don't I don't think this is like quite as terrifying as that part is, but you can like always like pull ideas from anywhere, and like if you feel strongly about something, just take inspiration from that. All right, this was a fun one to record. Next, I'm gonna head to the Minesweeper area, so that is N, and then I'm gonna also do the Bathhouse in the same one. So yeah, this was about my favorite stage, and the next stage that I'm going over is gonna be my least favorite one. Let's see what I can say about that. All right, thank you.